Millennials talking HIV next.
When you love who you are and stay true to yourself, you inspire others to do the same. Ask your healthcare provider if Biktarvy is right for you, or visit biktarvy.com to view the important facts, including important warnings.
Hello there and welcome to Plus Talk on Plus Life. We're all about turning positive into a plus. Today we are talking to millennials and some would say the next generation of HIV. Joining me, we have Brenda, Kelly, and Sebastian. Thanks, guys, for being with us.
Thanks, Karl.
Thanks, Karl.
I want to start off by saying, millennials sometimes get a bit of a bad rap these days, but you guys are all doing incredible things by being out there, positive and proud, and trying to break down the stigma. But I have a question. Do you think millennials understand and get HIV and what it means in this day and age more than the generation before or the generation after, Gen Z?
I don't think so. I think that HIV has been out of the public domain for so long that the younger generations have almost forgotten about it. It's not even in their realm of understanding, or they're not thinking about it.
Yeah, Brenda, what do you think? I mean, you were born HIV positive, so this has been you've had it all your life. Does it shock you that people of your generation and our generation still don't get this?
Most definitely. I mean, when I came out as being somebody who was born with HIV, it's like such a total shock to people because they do think that it's a thing of the past. And so somebody like me could not live my entire life with it. And so it's just like, well, how does that even happen? Like, I thought all of those babies died a long time ago.
Wow.
Totally.
That's crazy. People say that to you?
Yeah.
Gosh. Sebastian, you grew up in our homeland of Australia, and you live here in the States now. What's your take on this? Do you think this generation understands it more, or do you find just as much stigma still?
I think it's a bit of A and a bit of B. I think it depends on what community you're sitting within. I think as a gay man growing up within the gay scene at a very young age, I had more exposure to conversation, and that conversation occurring sort of in the bars and going out and within the community. Certainly, I don't think the education was good enough in the high school setting, and being outside of that, like not being a gay man, I don't think I would get that much exposure to it. I would say there's certainly stigma within the community, but the more exposure you have to anyone who's living with HIV, the less stigma there is. So younger millennials certainly can be a bit blind to the risks and how many people are living with it.
Do you think that people, as you said, can be blind to the risks and, stigma still exists, but do you find that this generation is more forgiving or easier to come around once you've had that chat with them? Or
yes.
Do you think that their thoughts are still sort of stuck in the past? You say yes, Sebastian. What about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I totally agree. I speak to college and high school students, and when I share my story with people, I receive a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding, and a lot of really interesting and thoughtful questions. People want to know how they can support their friends or someone who might come out to them as being positive. People want to know how to continue the conversation after they leave the room. They ask questions about what it's like to live with HIV from like a really human standpoint, out of like curiosity. With all the work that I do speaking to high school and college students, it gives me a lot of hope for the next generations, just because they're so open and they're so willing to understand, and they're just so engaged. It's really refreshing.
Yeah, that is a nice take on things. Hey, Brenda, does it shock you that going to, Kelly's point there, that she talks in colleges, and I know you do talking too, and people are understanding, they want to be compassionate, then why are people still getting HIV? Why are people not getting tested? Why are people still in the dark about this?
I would say that it's still because of the stigma, and it's just a lack of education. It's a lack of awareness. It's, still just, again, the stigma of it being something of the past, but also something that's still very thought of as a gay disease or this disease or that disease. And that's part of why I even came out about it, was to show that, again, HIV does not have a face. Anybody can get it. And that's why we should all be taking accountability and responsibility for our own sexual health, because it can happen to anybody. And the first step is to just be informed and properly educated and aware and take action.
Yeah, Sebastian, what's your take on the stigma around sex? I mean, again, you grew up in Australia, as did I. In America, a lot of people are very, very uncomfortable even saying the word sex, let alone going any deeper than that.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to exposure to clear education, and that happening at a younger level, and access to good healthcare also destigmatizes the demons of the possibilities of sex. I think a lot of people have an unconscious fear of what might happen to them if they engage in certain behaviors, and so therefore they then either don't engage in those behaviors, or they do on some kind of unconscious level and then don't get the follow-up kind of sexual health they need and the checkups. And it depends on the social circles that you kind of mix in. I think some areas are don't even want to approach conversations around HIV or sexual health, because that is looked at as something that only happens with people who are more, liberal or more depraved. And then, in more conservative religious contexts, like I grew up Catholic in the country in South Australia, those conversations aren't even happening because they don't want to admit that that's part of the trajectory of someone's life, that we get married and we have children and everything's more direct.
Kelly and Brenda, I'll throw this one back to you guys. Do you think millennials are more open about talking about sex and sexual health than you think previous generations or people slightly older than you guys?
I think it really depends on where you are in the country and who you're talking to, because it varies so widely from city to city, from state to state. Places that are more evangelical and more Christian are going to be a lot less inclined to talk about sex openly. Other places that are more liberal are going to be much, the people in general, millennials, Gen Z, doesn't really matter, are going to be more willing to talk openly about sex and sexuality and sexual health.
Yeah, and Brenda, going back to you for a second, I mean, as I said at the top, you were born with HIV. This has been your life. You don't know anything other than having had HIV. And you talk at the stories of it shocking people, but do you think millennials are more open to talking about sex and sexuality a little more freely?
Where I am, I agree with Kelly that it might depend on where you are. I mean, I'm in rural Pennsylvania, and as somebody who grew up with it, I never got the sex talk. The sex education here was abstinence only. It was very shameful. It was very fear-driven, fear-based. And so coming out about it, like, I feel like that was the first time that people, millennials, Gen Zs in my area really were able to talk about sex and talk about STIs, because I was finally a face that had one, and I may not have contracted it through sex, but it's still an STI. And I don't think anybody ever had that conversation before. And then I had people in my community coming to me and disclosing their own statuses, but saying, I've never told anybody this before. So here, those conversations aren't being had. So I'm glad that I was able to kind of open it up, but it's still a little bit like pulling teeth, because then they want to go back to their lives and forget that it ever happened.
I'm going to put this out to all of you, and maybe Sebastian, you want to jump in first, but what is the biggest misconception that makes you want to scream and pull your hair out constantly, do you think, that exists around HIV within your community and your peer group?
Probably that people can either catch it, or that once you catch it, if you have it, that it's something that outside of effective medication, it's affects you adversely. Like I once I was diagnosed, I had a lot of people that sort of would check in, going, how's your health, and they'll still do that sometimes, with this sort of expectation that I'm deteriorating, and that that's not my experience of my lived life. Like I feel very healthy, I feel very clear, I live my life as I always have. I have access to medication. So that's a privilege to be able to say that. But also people have a fear. They still have a fear that they're going to get it. And so this like you equals you message is still something that I have to push always when I'm communicating, through dating apps or, out when I'm meeting people. And I have to stomach their fear, I have to be the advocate in every moment. And it's hard because unless someone's really pure of heart, they're not going to do that work themselves. You have to do that work. You have to bridge that gap.
Yeah, no, I totally relate. You equals you, undetectable equals untransmittable. Brenda, what about you? What's the one thing that makes you just want to pull your hair out? Go, come on.
Everybody in my town knows about you equals you, but I've still had past partners who have had people say to them, like, why would you put yourself in that position? Are you trying to kill yourself? Like, people still think that at some point I'm just going to die, and whoever I have sex with is also going to die if they get it. But it's like, to me, it's just like, I've had this for 24 years. I'm perfectly healthy and I'm not going anywhere. So
yeah. Kelly, what about you?
Yeah, it's a weird line that you walk as an HIV advocate, sexual health educator, someone who's open about being HIV positive, because on one side it's like, I'm perfectly healthy, I'm gonna live a normal life, I can have babies if I choose to, blah blah blah. But on the other hand, it's the stigma that makes this so difficult. So like on one hand I'm saying it's not as bad as you think it is, and on the other hand I'm saying I don't want anybody to get it because it is a pain in the ass. So it's like this weird tug and pull within yourself, because you're holding both of these thoughts, both of these truths, like equally within yourself. That's something that's difficult for me.
Yeah, and I think Sebastian made a good point there, that we sort of have to burden the responsibility constantly for having to explain you equals you. And yeah, okay, that's part and parcel of it. But sometimes you just want to go, oh, for God's sake, grow up and read a book kind of thing, right?
Totally.
Yeah, do the work.
Yeah. I agree with
do
that.
the work. Yeah, but we do. But what's great is, as humans, I think, it's nice to know that, yeah, we take responsibility for this. I've said a few times, in a lot of ways, HIV sort of saved my life. And I don't know necessarily, again, Brenda, because you were born with it, but it sort of refocused me and put me on a path as to where I am today.
Yeah, I think it gave me certainly an avenue to give back to my community, and it sort of made me go, oh, like, this is what I really want, and this is what I really love, and I love community, and I want to help community. And it got a lot of the crap out of my mind in terms of how I approach my life. And I think I became a lot more thankful and focused.
I agree with that. It completely changed my life for the better. It made me a better person. It made me reprioritize. It gave me purpose. Sharing my story with people and advocating became my mission when I was totally and completely lost before. I wouldn't change this for the world.
We've only got a few moments left on this episode of Plus Talk. I'm throwing this out to all of you, and maybe Brenda, you want to go first. What advice do you have for the next generation, Gen Z, when it comes to HIV?
That's a hard one. I would just say, like, again, as somebody who grew up with it, I feel like we still very much bear the burden of stigma. And I've seen so much internalized stigma in young people thinking that it's a consequence and it's a choice, and if only I had done something differently. So I think just the advice is to don't beat yourself up over it. Like, the whole point of dismantling stigma is to understand that it's not a consequence, it's not a punishment, and it's not your fault. It's something that happens because of very natural human experiences.
It's so refreshing to hear somebody say that. Thank you very much. Kelly, what about you?
I mean, you got the normal, like, use protection, get tested regularly, love yourself, take care of yourself. But also, as a sex educator, something that I really want to impart upon the next generation is to communicate with your partners. I just want younger people to have better sex. When you're talking to each other and respecting one another and getting to know each other on a deeper level, I think it makes for better sex. It also makes it easier to have the conversation about getting tested, using protection, And I just want the younger generation to have better, healthier, more enjoyable sex.
Without the shame, without the stigma. Sebastian.
I think the beautiful thing that this disease asks of us is that it shows itself up in communities that are marginalized and communities that don't get kind of the primary focus in society. And so it grows where sexual practices are stigmatized or drug use is stigmatized. And so in order to break free from this disease and to get out of it, we need to liberate those communities. And so it asks of us to have a better world. And so for the next generation to be educated and to be more accepting and to fight for access to healthcare on all levels of society, because you've got to bring everyone along. We stand on the shoulders of the people that came before us, and then they will stand on ours. And so it's about reaching above and below to all the generations.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Brenda, Kelly, Sebastian, thank you so much for giving up your time, sharing your stories, your thoughts, your opinions with us on Plus Talk on Plus Life. It's been a real pleasure meeting you. That's going to do it for this episode of Plus Talk. Remember, you can follow Plus Life across all social media platforms. We are at Plus Life Media, or check out the website for lots more information, lots of videos, cool stuff on there, pluslifemedia.com. Until next time, see you later.